It started with a low, ominous buzz in the pre-dawn sky, a sound that barely registered at first, but would soon echo across continents. For the workers at the Tuapse oil refinery, it was just another Tuesday. The night shift was winding down, and the first hints of sunlight crept over the horizon. No one expected that a Ukrainian drone, flying low and undetected, was about to slam into a critical processing unit and change everything. The explosion was massive, an eruption of fire and metal that lit up the night sky, sending shockwaves for miles around. The blast shattered windows, rattled nerves, and instantly transformed the refinery into a blazing inferno. This wasn't just another attack. It was a direct hit on the heart of Russia's economy. The Tuapse refinery was a vital artery, pumping wealth into the nation's coffers. The fire burned for days, sending thick black smoke into the sky, a flaming message to the Kremlin that Ukraine was coming for Russia's wallet. The world watched as the flames refused to die, a symbol of defiance and a warning of what was to come. Global oil prices jumped overnight. Insurance companies panicked, scrambling to recalculate risks. In Moscow, the government scrambled to respond as chaos rippled through the markets and uncertainty gripped the city. This was a major refinery, deep inside Russia, supposedly safe from the front lines of war. It was thought to be untouchable, protected by distance and defenses. But Ukraine's long-range drones proved that nowhere is truly safe. With each new strike, they exposed vulnerabilities in Russia's vast infrastructure, showing that distance was no longer a shield. The attack demonstrated that Ukraine could strike Russia's most sensitive economic targets, turning what was once a source of strength into a glaring weakness. The message was clear. Even the most protected assets were now within reach. Russia is, in many ways, a giant gas station with an army. Its power, its influence, and its war machine all run on oil and gas money. The nation's wealth is built on these resources, fueling everything from social programs to military campaigns. For 2 years, Putin shrugged off Western sanctions because the oil kept flowing. Tankers left port, pipelines hummed, and the Kremlin's coffers stayed full, allowing Russia to weather economic storms. But what happens when the gas station itself is burning? When the very foundation of Russia's economy is under attack, the consequences ripple far beyond the battlefield. Ukraine shifted the war from a slow grind of attrition to a campaign of economic destruction. By targeting infrastructure, they aimed to hit Russia where it hurt most, its wallet. Suddenly, the war was no longer just at the borders. It had moved deep into Russia's industrial heartland, threatening the very industries that kept the country running. The Tuapse attack was the opening shot in a new phase, Ukraine turning Russia's oil industry into its greatest liability. What was once a symbol of power was now a glaring target. The fire at Tuapse wasn't just burning oil, it was burning through Putin's cash reserves and his carefully crafted image of control. Each day the flames raged, the world saw Russia less invincible, more vulnerable. And for Ukraine, it was just the beginning, a signal that the economic war had only just started, and that Russia's most valuable assets were now its greatest risks. After Tuapse, the hits kept coming. Ukrainian drones struck refineries in Ryazan, Syzran, Kaluga, deep inside Russia. Each target was chosen for maximum impact, crippling facilities vital for gasoline and diesel production. The most audacious strike hit near Sochi, Putin's favorite vacation spot. A drone attack in his backyard was a massive embarrassment, showing even his symbols of power were vulnerable. These refineries are choke points for Russia's economy. Crude oil is useless until processed, and thanks to sanctions, Russia can't easily replace destroyed Western-made parts. Ukraine's campaign knocked out over 15% of Russia's refining capacity in weeks. It's the economic equivalent of sinking a fleet, but with cheap drones and a bigger impact on ordinary Russians. Each strike sends panic through Moscow and global markets. Ukraine has found Russia's Achilles heel and keeps striking it with precision. The message nowhere is safe and Russia's economic engine is under siege. The result was immediate. Russia started running out of gasoline. Across the country, the impact was felt almost overnight as fuel supplies dwindled and the reality of shortages set in for millions. Gas stations saw long lines, prices soared, and pumps ran dry. Drivers waited for hours, sometimes only to be turned away empty-handed. The frustration was palpable and tempers flared as people realized the crisis was only getting worse. For the first time, the war hit ordinary Russians. Truckers, farmers, office workers. These were people who had managed to avoid the direct consequences of conflict, but now found their daily lives upended by fuel scarcity. Putin's social contract, stability in exchange for silence, was cracking. The promise of normalcy was broken, and the public's patience began to wear thin as uncertainty spread. The Kremlin panicked, banning gasoline exports to keep fuel at home. Officials scrambled to reassure the public, but the sudden policy shift only fueled more anxiety and speculation. Russia, the world's oil giant, was forced to choose between its people and profits. The government's decision to prioritize domestic needs over lucrative exports marked a dramatic reversal of long-standing policy. The export ban was a desperate move, causing more panic buying and worsening shortages. People rushed to fill up every container they could find, fearing the situation would deteriorate further. Farmers feared they wouldn't have diesel for planting. Trucking companies faced collapse. The agricultural sector, already under strain, now risked missing critical planting windows, while logistics firms struggled to keep goods moving. The logistical network of the world's largest country was grinding to a halt. Trains sat idle, highways emptied, and the movement of goods slowed to a crawl, threatening the entire economy. Putin spent years building financial defenses, but ignored the physical infrastructure. While reserves of gold and foreign currency grew, the refineries and pipelines that powered the nation were left vulnerable and outdated. All the gold in the world is useless if you can't refine oil to move tanks or harvest wheat. The military and agricultural machines that once symbolized Russian strength now stood still, paralyzed by a lack of fuel. Ukraine's strategy bypassed financial defenses and struck at the system's heart. By targeting oil infrastructure, Ukrainian attacks exposed the fragility of Russia's war machine and its dependence on uninterrupted fuel supplies. The gasoline panic was the first major crack in Russia's facade of invincibility. News headlines blared warnings, and the public's sense of security was shaken as shortages became impossible to ignore. The economic engine of the war was sputtering. As factories slowed and vehicles ran dry, it became clear that without fuel, even the mightiest nation can be brought to a standstill. For 2 years, the world has watched a grinding war of attrition unfold in Ukraine. Cities have been reduced to rubble and the front lines have barely shifted, with both sides locked in a brutal stalemate. The cost in lives and infrastructure has been staggering, and the world has wondered how this deadlock could ever be broken. But Ukraine is fighting a 21st century war, one that goes far beyond the trenches. Instead of just meeting Russia head-on, Ukraine is striking at the heart of Russia's war machine, its oil-funded economy. By targeting oil refineries deep inside Russian territory, Ukraine is crippling the financial engine that fuels the Russian military. With drones that cost only thousands of dollars, Ukraine is inflicting hundreds of millions in damage. These small, agile machines are rewriting the rules of modern warfare, showing that you don't need massive armies to cause massive disruption. Ukraine doesn't need to match Russia tank for tank or missile for missile. Instead, it's attacking the economic centers that sustain the war effort: refineries, fuel depots, and supply lines, forcing Russia to defend its own backyard. The psychological impact is huge. Suddenly, Russia must pull its most advanced air defenses away from the front lines to protect vital oil infrastructure, stretching its resources thin and exposing its troops. Every S-400 missile system moved to Moscow or other cities is one less defending Russian troops in Ukraine. This shift weakens Russia's frontline positions and gives Ukraine new opportunities. Ukraine is forcing Putin to make an impossible choice: protect your army or protect your economy. Both are essential, but he can't fully defend both at once. The refinery strikes hurt more than battlefield losses. Putin's regime can absorb military casualties, but a collapsing economy threatens the very stability of his government and the loyalty of his people. Dead soldiers don't cause revolutions, empty gas stations do. When ordinary Russians can't fill their tanks or heat their homes, anger grows, and so does pressure on the Kremlin. The Kremlin can spin military defeats with propaganda, but it can't hide nationwide fuel shortages. The truth hits home when people are stuck in line for hours or when prices skyrocket. By targeting refineries, Ukraine is attacking the very foundation of Putin's power, the money that keeps his war and his regime alive. Ukraine's fight isn't just against an invading army, it's against an entire system. And with every refinery strike, they're proving they've found its most vulnerable flaw. As economic pressure mounted, the Kremlin turned on its own people. The FSB began hunting teenagers for posting memes about refinery fires. A 19-year-old was arrested for sharing a video of the Tuapse explosion with a laughing emoji. The government rushed through censorship laws, criminalizing any reporting on drone attacks not approved by the Ministry of Defense. Posting photos of explosions or discussing air defenses became illegal. The goal: total information blackout to hide the attack's impact. The real fear isn't drones, it's Russians learning the truth. A burning refinery video shatters the illusion of strength. Jailing teenagers for memes shows weakness, not control. You can't censor an empty gas tank, and every new law only fuels more distrust. While Ukraine hit refineries, the West tightened sanctions. The G7 price cap and sanctions on Russia's shadow fleet made selling oil risky and expensive. Major shippers, insurers, and banks began refusing Russian cargo. Even India, once a reliable buyer, started rejecting Russian oil on sanctioned tankers, fearing US penalties. For India, access to global markets outweighed cheap Russian oil. China, too, used Russia's desperation, demanding discounts and cracking down on Russian transactions. Russian companies struggled to get paid, and China became a predatory buyer. Putin's hoped-for alliances turned into humiliating dependencies. Ukraine's strikes, Western sanctions, and pressure from allies created a perfect storm. Russia couldn't refine oil at home or sell it abroad. The petrodollar flow that kept Putin afloat slowed to a trickle. The world was making business with Russia more trouble than it was worth. Putin was left increasingly isolated, politically and economically. The refinery attacks and sanctions are crippling Russia's war machine. A modern army runs on diesel, and Russia's military is now facing fuel shortages. Reports say frontline units are rationing fuel, limiting mobility and operations. Tanks without gas are just expensive targets. The financial fallout is severe. Oil and gas taxes fund Russia's budget. With production down and sales harder, there's less money for soldiers, weapons, and repairs. Putin faces tough choices: cut pensions or fund the war. As oil money dries up, the system that bought loyalty and stability breaks down. Ukraine's strategy is turning Russia's war machine against itself. Every drone strike is another nail in the coffin of the Russian budget. The collapse of the energy sector is leading to the collapse of the military and government. As his military falters and economy crumbles, Putin falls back on nuclear threats. State TV rattles the nuclear saber, but the world is no longer buying it. The threats have become routine, losing their power. Nuclear fatigue has set in. Western leaders keep arming Ukraine, and the world hasn't ended. Even China is telling Putin to stop the nuclear talk. Nuclear war is bad for business. Putin can't afford to alienate his last major ally. With his trump card neutralized, he's left with few options. The fear he once inspired is gone. He looks desperate, not strong. The refinery attacks have exposed Russia's fragility and forced Putin into a corner. For the first time, he's reacting, not dictating the conflict. Ukraine's strategy has shattered Putin's aura of invincibility and set the Kremlin on fire.